the headquarters of Telesur English in Caracas, Venezuela. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin with developing news as South Korean President Moon Jae-in has arrived in Pyongyang for the third Inter-Korean Summit with the President of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong Un. Moon was greeted by North Korean President Kim at Sunan's airport. During this three-day summit, the leaders will discuss the improvement of bilateral relations, the strengthening of economic cooperation, and the process of dialogue between North Korea and the United States for the denuclearization of the peninsula. This is the first time in 11 years that a dignitary from South Korea visits the city of Pyongyang. The Congress of South African Trade Unions could elect its first woman president, Singis Walosi, during its 13th meeting. Commissioners will also decide whether to continue supporting the African National Congress. The Congress of South African Trade Unions is taking place in Johannesburg. President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke at the opening.
Of the 54th Conference of the ANC decided that there should be expropriation of land without compensation, and this should take place without any fail. And it is going to happen because that is a decision of our conference. We want to utilize this as one of the comprehensive measures to accelerate land reform that will reduce poverty, that will strengthen the economy, and increase agricultural output.
Brian Malanga from Moja Media in Johannesburg brings us more details from the conference in this report.
We are at the 13th COSATU Congress. We've just listened to the president deliver his speech, the outgoing president, Duma Dlamini, and he was followed by the president of the Republic of South Africa, who is also the president of the ANC. Critical to their maiden speeches and to what they delivered this morning, they were intertwined. Actually, they had common themes. And what stood out for me this morning, or actually this afternoon, was the whole issue of gender. Gender seems to be top of the agenda at this Congress, and it's really hammered upon over and over again. And when one listens to the transformation that they want to see, even in their top leadership, one gets a sense that we will be getting female leaders in the next few days, and we'll just keep you posted, and we'll keep our ears close to the ground. But we gather that there are some female leaders that have been earmarked and that are being caucused to be postulated for a leadership position.
That was Brian Malanga from South Africa. Russian ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nevencia, spoke on Monday saying that sanctions against North Korea cannot replace diplomacy. The ambassador spoke out against what he called restrictive measures introduced by the UN Security Council against the DPRK. The Russian representative also directed comments at the US ambassador Nikki Haley, saying that the United States delegation banned a panel of experts from reporting to the Security Council and said that the US is preventing the publication of an independent report.
Restrictive measures, which were introduced by the Security Council resolution against DPRK, cannot be an end in itself. They have to be an instrument and tool in order to involve the country in a constructive negotiations, resolving the nuclear issue in the peninsula through just some sanctions and pressure on Pyongyang is impossible. Sanctions cannot replace diplomacy.
The United States will impose tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods as a retribution over Beijing's trade practices. The new income taxes will apply to more than 5,000 imported goods, including rice, textiles, and handbags. They will be imposed on September 24, initially with a 10%, but eventually increasing to 25% starting next year. China had already said it would retaliate if the United States imposed further tariffs. The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump has announced a cut in the number of refugees admitted to the country. The new cap for refugee resettlement will be the lowest since 1980. This move is a significant crackdown on the influx of refugees, considering the quota was nearly 85,000 in 2016 and will now go to 30,000 in 2019.
The United States anticipates processing up to 310,000 refugees and asylum seekers in fiscal year 2019. We propose resettling up to 30,000 refugees under the new refugee ceiling, as well as processing more than 280,000 asylum seekers.
A U.S. Border Patrol agent has been charged with the murder of 4 female sex workers. Juan David Ortiz was an intelligence supervisor with 10 years working for the patrol. He was also charged with aggression and unlawful restraint. The county district attorney considers Ortiz a serial killer and said that the reason behind his killings was still unknown. He was arrested after a 5th woman was able to escape from him at a gas station and found help.
I believe Ortiz targeted all victims due to their profession and being vulnerable. In addition, all the victims were defenseless, and at one point Ortiz was able to gain their trust and then viciously shot them. In an overall nutshell here, the perpetrator made a mistake and law enforcement capitalized on it. And that's how we were able to capture him.
Now to Mexico, where the remains of 157 unidentified people were left in a trailer near the town of Tlajomulco in central Mexico. Many of the bodies are believed to be victims of Mexico's war on drugs. They came from a morgue in the nearby city of Guadalajara in Jalisco state. That was at full capacity. After locals complained about the smell, the trailer was removed on Saturday. Mexico has seen over 30,000 murders last year. Most of them were gang-related. Our correspondent in Mexico City, Pablo Pérez, reports.
Yesterday, a trailer with the remains of 157 bodies was removed from the town of Tlajomulco in the municipality of Jalisco. The prosecutor's office admitted the bodies were deposited there in a refrigerated box instead of a warehouse due to the lack of capacity. After a few hours of being abandoned there, residents of the area understandably started to complain about it. This prosecutor's office is the same that has been waiting for the construction of a crypt with a capacity for 700 bodies in the municipality of Tonala. They promised this could be a solution for this case, but it is important to note this was not the first time this kind of thing has happened. There were similar cases in the municipality of Jojutla, in the state of Morelos, where unidentified bodies were deposited without any kind of procedure. According to Alfredo Lecona, of the organization Security Without War, this is a sign that the institutions are unable to handle the consequences of the violence that exists in Mexico.
That was Pablo Pérez from Mexico City. 1 year after Mexico's earthquake, residents of collapsed buildings are still homeless. Several victims are living in tents. They are urging the authorities to help them return to their homes. The earthquake killed over 350 people and flattened dozens of buildings in Mexico City.
It's been very hard on us. First, because we still don't have a building solution, so it's been a bit hard.
It's been very tough, seriously very tough, but I haven't had recurring dreams curiously. However, it's been very, very terribly hard.
Coming up, more stories. We'll be back.
FtS Documentaries presents.
A white man cannot get away with killing a young black man for whatever reason. He ain't have a gun or knife, that's execution style.
The Mike Brown Rebellion. Sunday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The Peruvian Congress will debate a possible return to a bicameral legislative system on Tuesday. This means the country could divide its Congress into a lower house and a Senate. This comes after President Martín Vizcarra called on Congress to debate 4 constitutional reforms that he says are essential to overcome the current political and judicial crisis. One of them is the bicameral proposal. Vizcarra said that if Congress does not comply, he will close the Congress itself. A court in Argentina has ordered the preventive detention of the former president Cristina Fernández de Kirchner over alleged bribery. The judge accuses Fernández of being involved in a bribery network that allegedly took place during her term in office. Before any arrest can occur, the Senate has to vote to remove her immunity. Many believe this is another case of political persecution against a progressive Latin American leader. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has the latest.
As we expected, Judge Claudio Bonadío has ordered the preventive detention of the former president and current senator, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, for her alleged involvement in a bribery scandal. The investigation relates to the so-called notebook scandal. Some businessmen and more than a dozen officials from the government of former President Cristina Fernández have also been named in the case. This is seen as a political persecution against the former president by the justice system, particularly by Judge Bonadío. Senators and political groups have different views on this issue, but it seems there will be no action to lift her immunity until the judge gives a concrete ruling and produces evidence of the accusation he's making. So the current senator, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, will continue to enjoy her parliamentary privilege.
The accusations against Cristina Fernández came as the government of Mauricio Macri presented its draft budget for 2019 to Congress. The main aim of the budget is to achieve a zero deficit by 2019, in line with the demands of the International Monetary Fund. Following the announcement, the country's currency, the peso, rose slightly. Since April, the country has been engulfed in a currency crisis and mass protests. The government insists the budget will increase public spending.
We want to emphasize that this is an austere budget, but with clear priorities. While primary expenditures increased 24%, social expenditures increased 32%. The investment on social security increased by 35%. Health expenditures increased by 29%, with expenditures on vaccines and medicine increasing some 94% over the year.
Former trade union leaders at Ford in Argentina are suing the company's former bosses over torture. They say they were detained in the company's factory and tortured by members of the military dictatorship 4 decades ago. The union leaders were held in prison for 2 years. They say the former executives were complicit in the 1976 coup d'etat and the 7-year-long military dictatorship.
We were taken away in the worst way. We were held for 40 and 60 days, a year under national executive power and enduring all kinds of torture.
We are the voice of those who will not and perhaps never will see justice for the 30,000 people who disappeared as well.
Now to Brazil, where the presidential candidate for the Workers' Party, Fernando Haddad, visited former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in prison. He said Lula was delighted with the way the campaign was proceeding, even though he was barred from standing.
Lula repeated that he will not trade his dignity for his freedom. He is convinced that the higher courts in Brazil and international bodies will find him innocent of the charges he was convicted of. Because there is no proof. In fact, there isn't evidence that a crime was committed. In addition to that, he praised our campaign and its priorities focused on workers' interests, jobs, and education.
Thousands of people gathered in Sao Paulo on Sunday to demand that Lula be freed from jail. We have more in this report.
People were indeed merry. They danced and sang together with local musicians. However, their party-like antics have a political side. They took to the streets to demand the release of Lula da Silva after 5 months of imprisonment.
It is important to use art for reivindicating our rights because they are taken away from us, even the right of making art. The coup that happened in Brazil was absolutely misogynist. It was against women in presidency, and now we are resisting and re-existing.
Free Lula's festival has taken place exactly 3 weeks before presidential elections of 7th October. This is the atmosphere right now in Avenida Paulista. Neither the prospect of being fined by Sao Paulo's mayor or the threat of violence could hold back the determination of the Brazilian people who marched to Paulista Avenue.
Fascism wants to take over the country, and we should take care to keep it away from the population. We need culture and art. That's the solution for our country, and not weapons.
Fernando Haddad, a presidential candidate of the Workers' Party, also took part in the festival. Notably, Paulista Avenue was turned into a strictly pedestrian-only zone with a cycle lane, so it should come as no surprise that the festival took place here.
Actually, we did have a candidate who could have won in the first round, but because he was disqualified, we have Lula's candidate. He made Lula's program belonged to his team. He is Fernando Haddad. Our job from now until October 7th is to turn Lula's votes into Haddad's votes.
A few days after his candidacy was announced, public opinion surveys show Fernando Haddad is in second in popularity, and in first place when the people know that he is Lula's candidate.
Ecuador will keep over 4,000 military personnel on the border with Colombia, following the recent clash between Colombian military and the Oliver Sinesterra Front. Walter Guacho Artiza La Vernaza, leader of the armed group, was shot and wounded in the Tumaco area. Ecuador's defense minister Osvaldo Jarrín says the Ecuadorian armed forces are prepared for any event, and that the government will apply special security measures to maintain peace, stability and security in the northern border.
We have been informed about an operation carried out by the Colombian military against forces of the banned group led by alias Guacho. Various military operations were carried out in Tumaco and north of Tumaco. The results so far indicate that he was wounded. A new operation is in progress, called Operation Candado, and this will give us a definitive picture of the situation.
Bolivia's President Evo Morales has asked Chile for calm as the nation awaits a ruling regarding their maritime dispute. Morales also asked Chilean President Sebastián Piñera to find an understanding in the dispute. He also said, quote, "The wounds that opened more than 100 years ago should be closed." Morales spoke after discussing the claim with a number of former presidents. The International Court of Justice in The Hague is expected to rule on the case.
After the discussion we had today, I'm sure that Bolivia will never give up its claims. We are optimistic because we have the truth and reason on our side. We are seeking justice. That is why I want to tell the press that it is going to be very important for all the Bolivian people. We have a lot of hope in the ruling of the International Court of Justice.
And Chile's President Sebastián Piñera has said his country is willing to talk, but he insists that the 1904 treaty should be respected since it's the answer to the maritime dispute. The treaty was signed to put an end to the tensions between the two countries, defining their current borders. And we'll be back after this break.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Cuba's President Miguel Díaz-Canel has said he supports equal marriage. During an exclusive interview with Telesur, Díaz-Canel said that recognizing same-sex marriage is another step towards eliminating discrimination. The new Cuban constitution will define marriage as between two people instead of between a man and a woman. And Díaz-Canel also said Cuba wants a dialogue with the United States government, but it won't accept their conditions.
You cannot have dialogue where one side puts conditions on the other, where you have to give up your sovereignty and your independence. You cannot have talks where one side demands you accept their agenda, and that is what the United States has been doing for years.
And Cuba is hosting an online forum called The World Against the Blockade. Researchers, academics, Cuban legislators, and people from around the world participated in this activity convened by the Cuban Institute of Friendship with the Peoples. The forum was disseminated through social media and broadcasted live on Radio Habana, Cuba. The participants showed their support for the island and denounced the system of sanctions against Cuba and the impact they've had on the economic and social life in Cuba.
Problems in the economy are problems with the human beings in numbers, in balance of payments in banking terms. That influences the daily quality of the Cubans, but also it affects in other countries that are affected by the blockade.
The position of the U.S. towards Cuba is not a problem of this administration or their government of the Party Democratic or Republican, conservative or liberal ideological approach, but is a reason of state.
The government of Guatemala has reaffirmed its decision to ban the head of the International Commission Against Impunity from the country. This comes after the Constitutional Court unanimously overruled the decision by President Jimmy Morales to ban him from entering Guatemala. Just over 2 weeks ago, Morales expelled the UN mission that was investigating him for alleged corruption. The decision prompted several protests. We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. So let's continue with our stories. We have another story coming from from Haiti. As you see now, the images are Haiti's Prime Minister Jean-Henri Séant and his cabinet were sworn in, but the new government is facing several protests in the capital. The announcement fueled several protests in Port-au-Prince. Fiery demonstrators erupted on Sunday following the ratification of Séant as prime minister. Protesters burned tires and also blocked major roads. Let's go to another story. Now, two presidents, Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan, reached an agreement in Sochi to separate Syrian government troops from rebel forces in parts of the Syrian province. All heavy weapons will be also withdrawn from the area. A demilitarized zone will come into force by October 15.
We both agree that implementation of the planned steps will give a new momentum to the process of resolving of the Syrian conflict politically, allowing us to intensify work on the Geneva platform, and that will contribute to peace returning to Syrian soil.
Together we will ensure the detection and the prevention of provocations by third parties and violations of the agreement. With this aim, Russia and Turkey will carry out coordinated patrols on the borders on both sides of the demilitarized zone, which will be designated.
Jordan and Syria have agreed on technical measures to open the common border. The announcement was made by the spokesperson of the Jordan government, Yuma Gunaymat. She explained that the two countries already set the date to open the border crossing of Nasib Yaber and Dera Ramita. She also indicated that both governments will implement measures to secure the process. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and many other stories, as you know, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.